It's 4:56 a.m. March 20th, 2026, and I just completed my letter to you, Isaac, in response to my reading, among other things that I associate with it. Your article into the hyper absurdism of our society or something like that, but part one, and of course I read part two first, but now I read part one and I understand it better and understand the terms you're using better. And so what I'm saying now is, once again, relevant to more of a Gestalt kind of approach. And I'm not going into the details of every jot and tittle from your remarks. But I did just complete it, and another parallel process, that I'm going through is the making of my flat for sport, just like I did with my flat for Sally and the flat that I made with your picture. I'm gonna just show you that flat. I just finished it and it's still drying, so I can't take it out of the mold yet, but it's a smaller one because, as I say, but here it is. And then on the other side is Sports Picture in my truck. And since my dogs are still sleeping, except Goldie just looked at me. See Goldie, go look at her eyes. I hope I shined it on her. She spies on me. But I'm gonna keep the lights dimmed if I have a hard time reading. I wrote it with the lights dimmed. Finished it anyways. But if I have a hard time reading, I'll turn the big light on. But this, since Dollar General only had 2 of these books left and they were both blue, I called it Into the Blue, volume 1 of 2, because I bought 2 of them. I have a feeling I'm gonna write one more. But anyway, I started this one on March 19th, 2026. And now it's the 20th, and so I wrote this starting at 10:49 a.m. March 19th, and I finished it just a little bit ago. And it's March 20th, just a few days before your birthday. But here it goes. Dear Isaac, as to the signifier and the signified, and I just wanted to say that preface, little twist or whatever that you had prefacing your writing, and just like you put a quote in the second part, okay? see, how did that go? Something like the prime duty of the artist is to make the artificial, but the second prime duty has not been discovered yet. All right, now I didn't get it just right, but I did find that amusing, and in the end I'm going to be talking about the twist because, you know, I see twists throughout what you write, but I also was introduced by that preface you made, that quote from something or other. But anyway, dear Isaac, as to the signifier and the signified, I do not hold this extinguished cigarette in my hand anymore, but when I did, I seen it, the red burning cherry, signifying to me T.S. Eliot's words in J. Alfred Prufrock, the bet end of my ways and deeds. I may have embellished. With only this self-reminder, my life is thus as a smoke offering, as a flame burned in one still point in time before and into that unquenchable fire. The fire into the fire, the nostrils of an all-consuming God. All right, I know I'm not reading real eloquently, but this is my first rereading of what I wrote. I wrote neatly, so I do believe that you can read it good. My chickens, or one, are now making a certain noise, a familiar call or a notice. Then and now, they or it continues with another sound which I no matter how hard I try, I cannot replicate. As I have woken from my dream, my half-sleeping dreams that I do hold as inspiration for me, I followed my habit, choring toward the flat I made of sport. It is almost ready to remove from the silicone mold I purchased from Amazon the other day and am now using for the first time. In this my attempt, I placed sports pitcher and adjacent flowers and sprouts face down because the mold is shallow, not more than 3/8 of an inch deep. I didn't know I bought a pack of 4, were so shallow when I ordered them. I bought them because they were smaller and reusable, and due to the cost of epoxy resin, I had to negotiate between what I can realistically afford and the fact that I have at least 21 dogs to commensurate and signify or remember. I did begin my pursuit, as you recommended, of Jean Baudrillard's work addressing hyperreality, the fulcrum and signifier and the signified. Upon wakening, I thought I remembered you pointing or referencing the visual, but upon rereading your text message, I realized you did not use that word, but did reference the coloring book. That reference merged in my thinking with regard for the spring pin, with regard for the quote-unquote spring pin, which I derived from my dream regarding the spring screw. Upon further analysis, rereading the definition and contemplating its function, knowing it was given to me as a point of inspiration in my dream 2 nights ago. I seen the point of the metaphor. The spring-guided linchpin or screw serves as a guide to join two things or engines in machinery together, two disparate functions together. And such is the way in time and space. Things are only true in time, and the times are changing, but we cannot afford to or the casting away of time, because in time we are intrinsic to one another. We are forever intrinsically bound and must be in reality, hyper-reality of which Baudrillard wrote and you referenced will be a subject I delight to pursue. But I start my day with the auto-recollection for a reason I don't know, with the words from a song my mom would play from the vinyl on which it was recorded. Remind me where you brought me from, and remind me, dear Lord. Together, we in humanity are joined. We are linchpins to each other, and we, each one, are disparate engines bound together, expressing in one paragraph the sentences of us all. And it is a beautiful flame, a fire that burns up into the nostrils of our all-consuming nature of being, into the God of all eternity. What remains in time is the butt end of our ways and deeds, a picture, a commemoration, just as I am making in my flats, because I just made up that word to signify my dogs, the signified. That things are cyclical never leaves my mind. When I went to check on Sport's flat, a commemoration of my time on earth with him, and in remembrance of the words given to me in my inner voice as I heard them, Sport has another mission to tend to. That's what I heard in my mind when I realized Sport was on his way out. Sport has another mission to tend to, that I must let him go, that all the signs are there. When I look at the picture of him so synchronistically popped up on my phone, that popped up on my phone display, I suppose randomly, as the iPhone produces them in some uncanny way, Sport's eye, especially one of them, feels piercing, as though he sees perhaps still, but nevertheless saw deep into me with something about to say, the uncanny language of a dog, but not just any dog, because Sport was special to me, and I know what Sport stood for. I know him, and will know him for the remainder of my life in time. Sport was and is a linchpin for me. Sport's essence and nature, although not exactly the same in function and purpose than mine, is such that we could have never worked alone. While it may appear at times that we live our lives in a vacuum, and there is a lot in space that seems to be so, it is not a vacuum. Particles, as they have recently found, even more than the aforeknown protons, neutrons, and electrons, hold us together like linchpins in the great conversation of which we all partake in our time and purpose. I planted flower seeds yesterday, and now I just came back from the store fetching 4 cans of dog food. One of my dogs is making a noise. I plan on feeding my dogs, Goldie, Bonnie, Mr. T, and Rip, a mixture of gravy train beef chunks and gravy with rice and some other canned vegetables, as yesterday I gave them each 2 chicken leg thigh quarters. On the way back home, I listened to an excerpt from Pete Hegseth's message, which I can only refer to as his buy the ticket speech, because that's what he told his Israeli audience to do in Trump's first presidency. He was talking about the fulfillment of apocalyptic assertions that the temple could be restored on the Holy Mount. His message was recalled because of Trump's assertion this morning that Iran is being so radical because of religious fury. This is prime example of hyperreality regarding his disinformation. Nothing could be more opposite to the truth. Netanyahu is the one who is the one with apocalyptic fervor, a fervor based on Israel as God's chosen tribe, while Hegseth purports his persona to espouse Israeli nationalism and predominance in the end of time, and sees the Republican agenda in support of this apocalyptic drive for a different purpose, of course, and that is the fundamentalist Christian notion of the physical return of Jesus and the Great War, the Battle of Gog and Magog, the Battle of Armageddon. It is Israel and her vassal child, spiritually speaking, the United States, who will be dismissed in the end as only a servant to usher in the great tribulation before Christ's return and his 1,000-year reign of peace. It is this mistaken metaphor that is driving the support of the gullible unwitting. Iran follows a different path. When I was planting my flower seeds, as I was pulling weeds and turning the soil in preparation, I got a splinter, maybe from some firegrass. I washed it, sucked on it, and couldn't see any visible mark on my skin. Today, however, it festered. I began pinching out the blackhead that appeared. In doing so, I was reminded of my dad pinching out a metal sliver he got from work he took into his thumb when working at the Ford stamping plant in Chicago Heights. I remember quite vividly the gob of pus that came out and the cavity left behind his red, inflamed skin as the swollen pressure of infection was expelled. For me, this is the true metaphor pointing to the signified reality of our day, a day and time in which false realities and narratives infect our being as foreign objects, causing the havoc and the pain, the feeling of the most, and the privilege of the predators hell-bent on destruction driven by advantage, weaponry, hate, and greed. It is sad so few can see through the bullshit. It is this phenomena that plagues us all, that we in the part of the mob violence cannot seem to see through the bullshit narratives, that like a splinter starting small at first festers into infection that must be expelled if we will survive the narrative of the hyper-reality which sickens us. May the great conversation prevail. There is fire in the belly of both man and beast within our own beings. We have conflicting forces, energies built within us, which must be harnessed, tamed, and balanced, as the tradition stemming from the East portray in the symbol of the yin and the yang. Personally, it is hard for me to fathom a universe of pure light. Shadow is as much a part of color and necessary for light to be realized as the smoke of my life offering is in the formation from time. That's the way I see it. Fire in the belly makes it rise just like the sacrifices of our primitive past points us toward our acknowledgement of the transcendent meaning, which so hardly can be breached upon in word. But at least we do have words now and understandings now which help us point the way. I poured the juice from the hot dog pack in a bowl after feeding my dogs, each one from the pack. Bonnie was on the spot. They all know my habit. They all have fire in their bellies. But Bonnie this time came first. She bowed her head to the bowl of my offering to her as the God to me she is. And first, before consuming, as in prayer before a meal, she looked this way and that way, and then licked it up, just as we would in our own thanksgiving or prayer. We say grace before feeding the appetites so necessary for our lives to survive, and we suppose that God must be the same. Lots of laughs. I'm not trying to discount the truth of what we have been given. I'm just rehearsing the visual embedded in the elemental. I suppose the elemental aspects of our lives, like the furnace in our appetite for something relevant to our survival, something real. Reality for some people is quite superficial. Again, I suppose it is because they are nothing more than transactional automatons, void of deeper existential observation into the uncanny mysteries of life in her quintessential form and beauty. I am though. That's why behind the pictures I am making in my flats, there is deep understanding and reverence that, like the spring-loaded linchpin or screw, binds one reality to another, and as fire in the belly of mythos joins me to my perceived maker. I see the linchpin as a scientific process. The scientific procedure always tries to disprove itself. So the spring pushes against the drive of the screw, That's like the scientific procedure, because in the scientific procedure, you always try to disprove your hypothesis. Okay, so you always have counter force against what you're trying to prove, okay? The scientific procedure always tries to disprove itself. It is in this tension we are held in position. It is a self-retaining praxis. It keeps us stable, aligned, and ready to join forces with what we do not know, but venture in the hypothesis of our inventions. I say all that just so you know how thankful and grateful I am to know that you will continue on in this, the great conversation. March 19th, 2:44 p.m. In life and in death, we do for another what we can neither do for ourselves, nor what the others can do for themselves. This is the relationship I have with my dogs. I do for them what they cannot do for themselves. And they also do for me what I cannot do. Of course, this is the way of interdependence and reciprocity. This is the aspect of living so absent from President Trump's modus operandi. his one-sided approach to every one of his encounters, personally, professionally, publicly, and dispositionally, transactionally, is taking America by the hand to hell. We are going to hell in the hand basket, prepared for him to carry us in, either by God or by stupidity, I suppose. America has become the proverbial innocent and dumb sacrificial lamb being led to slaughter before the world, and rightly so, because as a whole we have feigned superiority, as in the meta-rill of our arrogance, as in that notion of divine destiny. Of course, divine destiny was the impetus and belief of the people when they were trying to conquer the territory, and we are benefactors of that. But we have feigned superiority in the meta-rill of our arrogance, as in that notion of divine destiny. Of all the dastardly delusions and hyper-reality fixations, what could be more counterproductive? Well, I suppose there is one thing that would measure up to our founding treacherous notion, and that would be the creation of a cyborg god through the advent of AI superintelligence. So now I am going to read the first part of your essay and find a place to plant the new pepper seeds that I bought. Although my big, beautiful habanero pepper bush was killed by the frost and appears now to be all dried up, I'm going to leave it be and see if anything remains alive in the Rizzo, in the root. These terms you have introduced to me have been helpful in the cultivation, the gardening of my mind as I work the soil of my heart. Thank you, both you and Aileen, for hammering out some of these garden utensils. P.S. If you would allow me one word of advice in the context of product improvement, you must also create, in addition to your sophisticated approach to the mechanisms of your conversation, a more user-friendly version that can be absorbed by those who have more blunt sensitivities than your own. March 19th, 5:34 p.m. I just finished tilling a patch about 7 by 7 square, 7 feet by 7 feet square. The dirty soil is rich and black, unlike most of the sandy soil in Florida, because that was one of the 2 sections I used to burn leaves and brush and garbage at before I made my climbing wall and billboard. I did not have to pull out many roots and weeds, and the soil was easy, moist, and cooperative. I did feel the pain in my heart and the hatred toward the time it seemed after zooming in on a picture I took of someone who was going to move here. I seen Quinn's body stretched out on top. I was preoccupied and was distracted from the fire because it was lit that time, because it was lit by somebody else. That time will forever be burned into my memory. And I took a picture of this guy, but in the background of the picture, after I zoomed in on it, that's when I seen Quinn. By these treacherous monsters who lived on my property. And I retained the picture in my mind. In my heart, I feel the vehement rage and would feel one understands those as one would the vehement rage one would feel when one understands those closest to him wanted nothing more than to kill his dogs because they knew and felt too much. My dogs did. They knew and felt too much. They were obstacles. But I said in my heart to her, Quinn, peppers will grow in the same space your dead body was burned, the space christened with your remains. Some of the remains in parentheses, because I found the rest in my garage and in the road. Unquote, parentheses. With your remains, Quinn, I mark this as holy ground. Every pepper I pick and eat will be to me as the body and the blood of Jesus Christ's sacrifice. The life given for us that we might live in memory as we partake. Naturally, the two memories are different and mean different things, but they both are vicarious. Quinn was slain as Christ was slain. Both swords, both ties, both mockeries remain in my heart. The challenge for me is not to avenge their killings, but to let it turn the soil of my heart and grow something out of it, just as I know they both would have, or have it. But they both would have, or they would have it. I did not arrive at this position overnight. In fact, I first erected a cross 16 foot from head to toe and raised it 4 foot in the air, hanging from a tree by a steel rope. A big one, almost an inch thick. 16 foot from head to toe, with the warning that says on the left hand, in memory of the beguiled, the poisoned, the slain, the loved one you never had. And on the right, in regard for Jesus Christ, Paul, aka Saul, Barabbas, and Judas Iscariot. I will not kill these treacherous murderers for past atrocity. But in the body, I said, if anyone comes on my property with untoward and malevolent intention, I will put my scope on you and blow your mutter humping brains out. By proxy, Hasatan. Before that, and I'll tell you more in a bit. Before that, I did ride my bike to the place this fella, part of the group formed against me, frequented, wearing a top hat with bones in it, and put his friends on notice that I was looking for him. And when I found him, he was a dead man. And I said, tell him, these are the words of Hasatan. I played the character. It took me a while to bleed out the poison such treachery elicited in me. But I came to a higher vibration. In time, I was able to rise from the ashes of her burned remains. However, the fire still does burn, not only in my belly, but in my heart and soul. Even now, as I told the cops, the sheriff's office, when I had seen evidence someone had gone into my garage to steal from me, I told them in no uncertain terms that I would not start locking my doors. I didn't have to lock my doors, but I would lie in wait, and if they opened my door, I would blow their brains out. Just letting you know in advance, because I do not want to be arrested for murder. I told them if they wanted to act proactively, I implore them to patrol the area more intentionally, especially since my next door neighbor, who I also discussed the matter with, since she has cameras, because I asked her, what you can see on my property. Since she has cameras, she told me several vehicles have been stolen in the area. Well, that was a divergent note based on my tilling of the soil. In a more relevant note regarding the ethos of our mutual times, I finished my work in the patch of soil I tilled and turned my smart TV off. And in the patch of soil I tilled and turned my smart TV off from the place it had been paused since I woke this morning to the news headlines provided to my echo chamber and the algorithm YouTube offers me. Okay, so I understand what's going on, about echo chambers and all that, but I get the receipts, all right? I don't buy into bullshit like from Fox News. Okay, so these are the headlines. Breaking news: Trump alienates allies after outrageous. And in these headlines, they never complete the sentence because there's not room enough. So you're left to wonder, outrageous what? Okay, but that's what it says. Breaking news: Trump alienates allies after outrageous. That's from Aaron Parnas. Trump scrambles as Corey Lewandowski gets horrible. And that's from David Reddish show. Live. Trump faces collapses in war. No escape. Midas touch. It just got real. The war is getting out of hand. And that's from Professor, and I'm not sure how you say his name. It's spelled Jaing. And his last name is Xueqin. He's a Chinese guy that was raised in Canada and went to school in America. And he does a podcast called Predictive History, and I've been watching it. It's very edifying. And I like the way he presents things. He's very easy to follow. And he does it by the numbers. Just like Captain James Brown. Or I don't know if his name is James. Captain Brown always told us to do aboard the John F. Kennedy when I was in the Navy during the Gulf War. He reminded us every night, keep doing things by the numbers. And Zhang, Professor Zhang, he does things by the numbers. All right. Trump collapses in White House. Loses control of war. Midas touch. Major push to impeach Pam Bondi. Aaron Parnas. Prosecutor drops bomb on Bondi and Epstein update. Brian Tyler Cohen. And since I had my TV paused from this morning and marked the broadcast as one to watch later, it has the rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire, and that comes from Predictive History, Professor Zhang, who I have been watching. Trump DHS pick implodes in brutal confirmation hearing. Pod Save America. Iran shoots F-35 down. Mahmoud OD. Then there are a couple from Fox News I always ignore since I refuse to even give them a click. Then, finally, there are many more to choose from, but and this is one. I pray that God kills him. Hegseth pastor. And he, the pastor, prays for James Talarico's, and then they don't say. And that was misleading because I thought they were praying for James Talarico and praying that God would kill Pete Hegseth. And I said, right on, I'm going to be down with that too. I hope he does too. But that ain't the way that it went. All right. And I'll talk about that later. Later this evening, YouTube will support me for my stuff related to science. Okay, so in the evening, YouTube gives me stuff about science and philosophy, or stuff I've searched on in that regard. See, YouTube has my number, so to speak. It knows what I dial into, the sources I draw from, as you might say. Bring receipts. It does introduce me to other bullshit, but I give a like to every broadcast I think is worthwhile, not completely redundant. I continue to analyze all the paid commercials as to the nature and gimmicks they employ, and I have purchased two things I've seen advertised. I bought the Masato knife and the Panda drums I had sent to the three of you. I hope you will find them useful as Arden grows into them. I did not buy one for myself, so I am continually curious over their advertised frequency and delight. My resin I buy from Amazon along with the books I buy, because I would have to travel too far to find it otherwise. Enough of that. I'm gonna catch some news and read the first part of your essay, and then Sand Sports Flat. I just listened to Pete Hegseth's pastor pray for the death of James Tallarico. This was by Jesse Delamore podcast. I understood the ad to say Pete Hegseth's death, but it was James Tallarico. And in fact, I seen the live interview. Delamore brought the receipt. It is very disturbing to see a Christian pastor, a wolf in sheep's clothing, rally a bunch of white Christian nationalists behind a fictitious banner for Jesus Christ. I've seen a person I knew from church, and a church I attended in high school, who became a pastor in the area, and I accepted his friend request on Facebook. He made a post such as the banner Hegseth pastor calls members to rally behind, saying, and this is what this guy knew said, saying, "America runs with ice." I asked in a comment, "What do you mean?" He did not reply. Then I seen another one asserting that we need to pray that Trump's agendas prevail. Well, before that post, I sent him a direct message in Messenger. He read it, but obviously did not take it to heartful consideration, because, again, he did not reply. I told him, reminded him, that Jesus said the only sin that would not be forgiven in this life or the next is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. Blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is attributing the work of the devil to God, or the work of God to the devil, and that he better get it right, because I am here to tell him he is outrageously wrong. This is the context I underscore hyperreality. I should say, this is the context in which I underscore hyperreality. I just felt the need to say that after hearing Hegseth's satanic minister blaspheme the Holy Spirit, a wolf in sheep's clothing. March 20th, 2:19 a.m. I got up at 1:32 a.m. As I woke listening to Jeffrey Sachs bring real politics to the EU Parliament, as Henry David Thoreau, a proponent of transcendentalism, stated, "A fault finder will even find fault in paradise." So I have heard men of less stature criticize Jeffrey Sachs, but I find his tenor to be tuned in to the footbeat of common men like me. The ideals he espouses to me are both steady and sure. When I listen to his critique, especially of America, it falls upon my ears gracefully, and in this case, as I was waking, he was talking about Finland with respect to her happy state, ontological, in parentheses, state of being. Since I woke, I felt it was good time to sand and finish the backside of Sports Flat. So I did, and then I read the first part of your essay. This time it was an easier read because I already had the introductory concepts you are using in my mind. On this read, however, I was able to tune into your resonance better and became more enlightened to the terms as you are using them and as your references have used them. You identified poetry as your forte. There is a kind of poetry in the technical writing of people such as William James and yourself. As in William James, and I'm sure in you also, when you relax into the more mundane and down to common earth language, rather than scientific language, notwithstanding the scientific language you study may be commonplace to you, is somewhat of a barrier for the less educated due to our retardedness or intellectual infirmities, as cited in the clip I copied down for you in my 6th volume. I want to reassert the opinion I stated earlier in this book that I gain the appreciation of the wider, more common audience. You do well by fleshing out scientific jargon, making it more precise to your readers. Unless, of course, you don't wish to save them in the imitation of Christ. Jesus Christ, for example, spoken word and parables that could reach the blind. A person doesn't have to be a miracle man to touch the blind. The person must only be approachable. Jargon separates the classes. There are and will always be those who do not want the lofty touch of a scientist. They are content with somebody who appears real to them, somebody who they understand has walked in their shoes, so to speak. The best doctors are the ones who can set aside lofty explanations of all they know to be true and bring it home to the family in their care. When I worked in the hospital with your mom, there was a doctor. His name was Dr. Robbins. He was a heart specialist, but I was a chaplain, a patient family counselor. I was also a heart specialist, just in a different way. So we all have our hats to wear and our tasks to perform, our roles to play, but I believe your cutting edge is to bring your message home in a way that reaches our spiritual and emotional and blunted cognitive hearts. That is my critique of your writing style, reflected upon only this one more scientific approach. That being said, this your writing is veiled in classic poetic form, and I don't believe it is artificial in the common sense of the word. I believe it is real, just as I believe you to be. There are clever twists in your approach and propositions, the tools of your trade, the language you use as the others you reference do also. And these are a parallel process in my thinking as I juxtapose your subject matter to your style. I just interluded with a pause, a break, to go to the gas station as I turned the motor on. As I turned the motor of my truck on, a song came on I never heard before on the radio. I never heard before. Because it is nighttime music for a select group of people. And that's what WMNF does. They're a community radio station, and they don't use the pre-planned stuff that everybody, syndicated stuff everybody else uses. Okay, so a music for okay, the song was Sequentia sequential slavery. Sequential slavery by Deadlife. On the way back, about 200 yards ahead of me, the railroad crossing bars began to drop and the red lights began to alternate back and forth in step with my own emerging rhythm as I imagined myself pushing the gas pedal to the floor and gaining a rate of speed that would kill me on contact with that fierce locomotive. Like, I imagine it right there immediately, all right? Like I could blast it and just crash right into that son of a bitch. I just have a little post-trauma, that's all. The same one that killed Commander Worf, Mickey, and Nikki. The rage still lives in my heart, a rage against the machine. The same rage that filled the hearts of my dogs when in self-abandonment they charged that great noisy beast. That in their minds and hearts should never be. It wouldn't take me much effort to do it. It would just be a matter of one careless choice, driven by latent emotion burned into my soul and lying in wait for the right time. But I live my life in measured time. This gives me the advantage, perhaps like the Iranians. They will win this war precisely because they are measured and exercise supreme restraint, contrary to the Trump regime's false characterizations and narrative, false narrative. The citizenry of their land have been hardened like steel against the tyranny of the American empire. And while they have never attacked first, they will make Pete Hegseth eat his words, as so should we. Understand this, World War III was started between the conversation of four men, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Pete Hegseth, and Donald Trump. There were no other advisors included. That's why when that intelligence lady, I forget her name right now, but I seen her testifying in the hearing, okay? She couldn't even say that Donald Trump ever even talked to her. Not really. They give these stupid blanket statements of policy that are nothing but a bunch of bullshit. And it don't take a wizard to see through that mess. There were no other advisors included except, of course, Netanyahu. He is a Yahoo. Just another monkey grabbing shit from his ass and throwing it at people for his own pleasure. At least that is the etymology of the word Yahoo, as I learned it, reading something in literature class in high school. Well, back to the clever twist. We find this clever twist in the whole of nature, just like the ratio of pi. Even God's self surprises us with clever twists. And in the binary of a dualistic form, we find this tactic is also used by the devil himself, as seen especially in C.S. Lewis' Screwtape Letters. On what? Oh, what a tangled web we weave when at once we learn to deceive. It is all a matter of how you twist. I suppose the song Twistin' the Night Away has always found a special place in my heart, especially, I reckon, because it came from my mom's generation, and I watched it enacted on the show Happy Days. Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz. His character really brought a twist to that little rock hop town, and all the girls loved him. Jesus Christ also brought a clever twist, didn't he? All the great legislators, as you referenced it, provided twist in their poetry and prose. After all, we find this at the edges, in the cutting edge. It is a fine line to dance. I do believe you are finding your charm in that place few seldom enter. And I am delighted, moreover proud, to follow you there. I really don't want to, if I really don't want to, if I go too deep into my heart, collide with a train, as some of my impulse imaginations might suggest. I much prefer to live as an Iranian, with restraint and measure. I'm saving these two last pages for some pictures. Love, Dad.